It's one of the most prized and sought-after natural resources on Earth. But it's being plundered. Some of Europe's most respected companies have been circumventing the law to get their hands on it. And we've got the evidence to prove it.
We received more than 1,000 pages of Croatian customs documents acquired through freedom of information laws that showed how these companies were knowingly breaking European timber regulations and using a backdoor into the market.
We're talking about Myanmar teak. European timber traders are desperate to acquire the king of woods for the manufacturers of upmarket furniture products and to sell on to luxury yacht builders for decking.
Royal Deck is one of the leading companies in producing and laying top-quality teak decks, stairs, cap rails and other specialised carpentry works on superyachts.
The EU requires any imported teak from Myanmar to have been legally logged. But the member states have taken what's called the common position and come to the conclusion that there's no reliable way of discovering whether it was. Yet hundreds of tons of Myanmar teak is still being exported and ending up on the European market.
The documents we obtained relate to 10 shipments over the last 3 years, weighing about 144 tons and worth a conservative $1 million for those that import, but substantially more as it goes through processing and end use.
All those shipments were organised by Viator Pula, an import-export company on the southern tip of Croatia's Istrian Peninsula. And it has only one registered director, Igor Popovic. The shipments went to 6 large European timber companies. 4 are based in countries where there have been crackdowns on trade in Myanmar teak. We're aware that action has been taken against 3 of them in the past for breaches in Myanmar teak import and marketing rules. What's more, in the past couple of years, Belgian and German customs have sent warning letters to companies in those countries, reminding traders of Europe's common position, that it was impossible to import teak from Myanmar that satisfied EU regulations. Yet there's been a surge in imports of Myanmar timber through Croatia, which has coincided with those warnings. The forests of Myanmar are being destroyed at an alarming rate. An area the size of Belgium was felled between 2001 and 2018.
Acknowledging the problem, Myanmar set about reducing its annual cuts and introduced a log export ban.
In support of countries attempting to combat illegal logging, the EU introduced regulations designed to prohibit illegally sourced timber from entering into EU markets. They also placed obligations on the timber operators to conduct due diligence. That's to ensure that the timber they acquired was actually from a legal source.
But it was soon realised that there were problems. It has to date been clear that Myanmar is unable to comply with these laws.
And that's where Igor and Viator come in. The documents reveal a scheme to use his company to supply teak to traders throughout Europe, avoiding the import regulations. In effect, paying him to break the law. And they'd be off the hook because of 2 loopholes in the legislation. The first involves what's called the operator.
Only the operator, that's the person or company that first places timber on the European market, has to conduct due diligence. That is to ensure that the timber was acquired from a legal source in Myanmar.
So the responsibility for showing an unbroken and legal chain of custody for the teak, from the moment a tree was felled to the day it was imported into Europe, with all the documented evidence, was Viator's, not the buyer's. The second loophole lay in identifying a European country with weak timber regulation enforcement.
In that case, a company in the country with poor enforcement could bring timber into the European market and sell it on to any other part of Europe without the buyers having to worry about whether the timber was from a legal source.
But Croatia hasn't turned out to be the soft touch some thought it would be. When Croatian customs checked on those 10 shipments and examined Viator's paperwork, they found that documents were missing, some were incomplete or hard to read, and there was a mixing of paperwork between shipments. There also appeared to be discrepancies in the stated value of shipments declared to Myanmar customs and then to Croatian customs. Igor Popovic has now been given time to produce proper due diligence documents or face the consequences. He told us that twice in the past 3 years his importation documentation had been inspected and nothing was lacking, adding that on this occasion too, the authorities will
come to no other conclusion that we acted in conformity with the European timber regulations.
But what about those European timber trading companies who were Viator's customers? They would have known that buying teak via Croatia would raise legal problems because of the EU's common position. Crown teak, which had already been found to be in violation of timber regulations for previously importing illicit wood from Myanmar, states on its website how it normally acquired stocks of teak from that country.
Through a permanent presence and by participating in the monthly bidding process of the teak parcels auctioned by the government and national forest authorities.
So it begs the question, why is Crown now buying Myanmar teak via a Croatian company? But they didn't answer, due to their office being closed because of the coronavirus. Van der Kasteel, another timber trader that's been a repeat offender for breaching EU timber importation regulations, has a corporate sustainability charter, which states that they have
signed up to environmental objectives exceeding applicable environmental legislation.
And they go further.
We will ensure that information about suppliers and sources of material is collected and evaluated.
So did Van der Kasteel check that Viator wasn't circumventing EU law? And that Igor had carried out due diligence to ensure the timber being sold to them was legally sourced? They deny trying to circumvent the regulations and say the responsibility was Viator's.
At the time of the shipment you are referring to, the due diligence system on teak import from Myanmar by Viator was not questioned by the Croatian authorities.
And what of Huthendal Buchart, another repeat offender? They had previously been found not to have carried out due diligence on teak supplies from Myanmar, and they were involved in another case of illicit timber being imported from that country via the Czech Republic. It was seized by the police. They told us that due diligence was down to Viator, not them. And they added,
"We strongly reject any allegation that we, by buying from Viator, was aimed at circumventing the EUTR."
WOB also strongly rejected the allegations, and HF Italy said any questions should be directed at Viator.
The problem is that there have not been substantial fines or punitive penalties against companies that have broken European timber regulations. Until there are, there will be little disincentive for companies to keep pushing the law as far as it will go.
What we want to see is full compliance with EU law, proper disincentives with effective penalties, and changes in the legislation to take action against those that are inciting, aiding, or conspiring to circumvent this law.
There's one other element of this story worth pondering. Trade statistics reveal that roughly 1,000 tonnes of timber from Myanmar was landed in Croatia during 2018 and 2019. But the invoices we've acquired show only 128 tonnes of timber coming through Croatia in those years. So what's happened to the rest of it?